Good morning. I was rereading my notes and we're gonna move on. So I wrote here where we're at. So I'm just gonna do a little bit review. 1984, Sir Francis Galton talks about looking through dictionaries, and he thinks that if we do that, or whoever does that, they will find words that will lead to behavior that will lead to making psychology more data driven. So that happens in 1884. In 1936, it was the first team that actually took this project on. And again, it was Gordon Allport and Henry Odbert. And they looked at the dictionary with a team of students, interns, and they looked at all the words and narrowed them down to which actually describe human behavior. I don't know if they were, I believe they were, but I don't know. Because one of the things with the Big Five is that the words that are being used, they don't want them to be moral or immoral. Okay, you can't say somebody's a good person, because what does that really mean, you know? So it's more about something that's not about morality. So that was one of the things too that they were focusing on. So Gordon and his friend Henry, there's no photo of him, took 500,000 words on the dictionary. They used Webster's New International 1925 edition. They went from 500,000 words to 18,000 words and narrowed those down to 4,500,000 words. Okay, so those were the words. Now, after them, in 1940, 4 years later, Raymond Christal, obsessed with data, obsessed with trying to make psychology precise and mathematical, replicable, and useful, he took those 4,500 words, and this is him, this guy, Raymond Christal. He narrowed use and factor analysis. His mentor was the guy that created the G factor, Charles Spearman. It was his mentor, and he's the one that created factor analysis. So his mentor said, use factor analysis to do this, I'm sure. And he went from 4,500,000 words. 4,500,000 words to 16 words. 16 words, okay? And I read them all to you last time on the last video. So that was that. And that was what year? 1940. Okay, now Christal created a test with those words. He created a test that people could use, that could be replicated, I believe. And that was that, okay? Now, in 1961, so 20 years later, okay, it stayed the same. For 20 years, it stayed the same. Now, 20 years later, in 1961, two guys that worked for the U.S. Air Force Army, Ernest Tupes and Raymond Christal. I don't have a photo of them. I tried to look them up, but they don't have a photo. So this makes it so even more interesting, okay? Even more interesting. 12 years later, okay, U.S. Air Force psychologist. So Ernest Tupes and Raymond Christal worked with the Personal Research Laboratory in Texas. And what they're best known for is that these two guys are the ones that for 2 years, this is all they did. They worked with the personality. They worked on this project. Okay. So they're best known for their technical report, which was the first clear empirical demonstration of the Big Five structure of personality. They're the ones that came up with the first five factors. Okay, so it went from 500,000 words, 18,000 words, 4,500,000 words, 16 words. And these guys got those 16 words and narrowed it down to five words. Do you see that? 5 words that can describe behaviors in humans. 5 words, okay? And this is what I found really interesting, okay? That the reason they started working on this is because the military wanted a better way to predict who would succeed in training and leadership roles in the U.S. Army. Before 1961, it was all about, I feel like, even now, I think psychology, going to therapy, going to counseling, it's more of like, there's still a stigma, there's still a stigma of, oh, you don't need therapy, or you don't need to do that, you don't need to do that. So imagine back in the 60s, how that was just like, if it's even stigmatized right now with certain people, imagine back then, right? So before, the people that actually worked in psychology and worked in trying to figure this out were very, I would say, people that were beyond the curve. You know what I mean? They knew this was very important for society, for humanity, to help humans, but they were also, I don't think your typical working class would go to therapy. You know what I mean? Because even now, your typical working class probably doesn't either. I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers, okay? But just from me growing up, therapy is more accepted now, but imagine back then, and also imagine the cost of it. Imagine the time of it. Imagine all of that, how much friction there would be. And then even it's like a new science, very skeptical, very like. And then also I feel that I believe, I don't know, that's just my perspective, anybody that's really interested in psychology, it also can be a little bit more, they can be seen as a little bit more maybe emotional or very high intellect, like hard to understand what you're talking about, just very like not practical. You know what I mean? Like, it's not in the practical sense. So the reason that I feel like this point in 1961 was so important was that the government came in. It's like the government came in to say, I don't care how fluffy, I don't care how sensitive, I don't care how like intuitive, like we want data. We want predictable, replicable data so that we can know, ton of money, right? A ton of money is on the line with the U.S. Air Force or whatever, the military basically. So they wanted to predict who would succeed in training and leadership roles. Traditional tests weren't enough at the time. They wanted a scientific, efficient way to understand personality traits that mattered for performance, teamwork, and stress resilience. It's like they came in and they said, we need to figure out how to grab personnel that's actually going to be good for the military. So their mission, their project was practical and mission driven, not academic theory or for theory's sake. Again, so important, right? Because this is the first time that this project became just, we want data, cold. It's the first time that it became cold, I think, in a way, to me anyways. So it took them 2 to 3 years of focused work. They reanalyzed data from the past. They didn't do this on new participants. They reanalyzed data that they already had so that it would be faster to figure it out. And then the report was a technical document. I didn't know what a technical document was, so it's like a user's manual. It's like a super boring, super boring document. And it's written, it's something that communicates specific, factual, and often complex information in a clear, precise, and a structured way. It focuses on accuracy, clarity, and utility. Again, manual instruction guides. So think of it like that. Super boring. So the audience was the Air Force decision makers, not the general public. It was meant to be used for practical decisions. And again, I put the shift to the U.S. force was turning point because the goal became practical and mission driven, not purely academic or theoretical. Okay. Yeah, and this is where I put, because when I was doing all this research, I was like, this is the first time that I just felt like, you know, I wrote this. I said, in pure academic philosophy or early clinical psychology, personality could stay fuzzy and warm, full of poetic descriptions, unconscious drives, moral ideals, and subjective interpretation. It didn't have to be provable or useful in high-stakes, real-world settings. And I mean, if you even think about it right now, whoever goes to therapy is because they're trying to understand themselves. Well, I know there's all sorts of therapy now, but I feel like, let's say I go to therapy, or whenever I went to therapy myself, I was so stressed out, and I needed to talk to somebody. I needed to talk to somebody to figure out my feelings and to like kind of redirect me. But then you also want like somebody, I know for me anyways, I wanted somebody that was also compassionate, that was understanding, that wouldn't be like making me feel bad or guilty for the ways that I felt. And you know what I mean? It's like fuzzy, like that's how I feel. Like I'm going to therapy because I want to feel like not belong, but like my belonging in the world, it's a little bit better than it was before I went to therapy, right? Like I'm not crazy, right? For thinking this, or you wanna feel like you belong more. And if you think about that, and you talk to maybe, you know, if you think about the U.S. military, I mean, I feel like anything in the military is like super cold, super analytical, super data driven. It's just like you have these two separate worlds, you know? So I feel like when the military got involved, the question wasn't what is personality. It was which traits actually predict who will succeed, fail, crack under pressure, or lead effectively in life or death situations. That question I think changed the whole personality psychology history, because it wasn't just let's figure it out because I know there's something here. It was just like, hey, is this gonna work in real life? Can I actually use this to assess the humans by their personality traits and see if they do a good job in like life or death situations? And it reminds me of when I was younger. I remember there were times when I went to, you know, in college they do like career days and stuff, and the military always appealed to me, but I just knew, like my heart, I was just like, I just can never do it. I was like, I can never be in the military. And I remember talking to there was a girl, like a guy and a girl there, and the guy was like, yeah, you can. And I'm like, no, I can't. There's no way I can do this. There's no way. Like, it appeals to me, the orderliness of it appeals to me, the uniforms, the just like the strength behind it, that appeals to me. But me myself, I was like, there's no way I could do that. There's no way. So anyways, besides that, so suddenly everything had to be measurable, replicable, predictive, reliable under stress, free of fluff or bias that could cost lives or waste training dollars. Before, it wasn't, I mean, it was like, yes, researchers, you know, before 1961, psychologists wanted it to be this. They wanted that to be the personality psychology, but I feel that in 1961 it had to be that. It wasn't an option. If we're going to be using this for military training to assess behaviors in individuals, and we have to figure out what is actually not going to make them break under pressure. What is going to make someone a good leader or a good, whatever. And I felt like when that happened, that's when this was no longer just part of psychology. Now it was just like life or death situations. I think that's really, really important. So the military context made the model cold and method, objective, statistical, no sentiment, but ended preserving the warm human traits that actually matter because they were factual and predictive. So we're not going to just leave these warm traits and personality because of, like, let's say philosophy, right? We will leave them there because they actually matter and because they actually do predict behavior. And I thought that was so interesting because what it meant is, like, if it's in there, it's because it matters. It's not because it's made up. It's not because again, I go back to, like, always feeling like I felt too much, like I was too sensitive, like I needed to be tougher, like I needed to learn how to be tougher. And what this test showed me, and we'll talk about this in the future episodes, but that's the thing. It's like it finally showed me why I had felt so different my entire life. And it's like so once I, fast forward, if there is a trait, if you take this exam, the Big Five, and there is a trait, your compassion trait, if it's extremely high, it's not because it's trying to make you feel good. It's not because, it wants to put humans all in the good. Like, it doesn't, like, it's not biased. It's not biased. It's like, it's telling you the truth. You know what I mean? It's not telling you something you want to hear. It's not telling you something you wish it were true. It's not telling you, it's not being moral. It's not saying, well, you're good because of that. No, it's actually telling you what's on the inside, what's creating your personality. So that is so important. That is so important, especially for people like us, that all our lives, our feelings would take over. They would just take over. You know what I mean? We felt everything. You felt when somebody didn't like you. You felt when somebody felt weird about you. You felt the energy. You felt people's energy. That's what I would say, And then a lot of the times you felt like you were crazy. You felt like you're like, it's just me. I'm the problem. I'm the problem because not everybody feels like that. So I'm the problem. That's when you start thinking that. But whenever I went through the history of the Big Five, it gave me statistical, non-sentimental information to describe who I am as a person, to describe my feelings that I've had my entire life. And it was something that God placed in my path to say, you are not crazy. You are not wrong. You are rare. And that is why you felt crazy your entire life. A little bit. Yeah. So they also applied factor analysis to personality ratings and consistently found 5 broad recurring factors. They didn't name them the Big Five at that time or build a questionnaire. They just found them. They proved the structure was stable and real. So after they found the big factors, they left it at that. They didn't try to do, because it was just for military usage. I'm assuming somebody else would take that on and figure out what they needed to do with that, but that was their project. So that was the first time in 1961, from 1884, guys, to 1961. This was the first time anyone had shown with real data that personality could be organized into 5 major dimensions, no matter how you slice the data. 5. You went from 500,000 words to 5 words. 5 words. Okay, so you know how long that report stayed internalized? Guess how long it stayed internalized. I'm going to give you a few seconds. I'm going to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 20 years. 20 years. It stayed internalized for 20 years. So they found 5 dimensions, and nobody knew about this for 20 years, except people in the military. 20 years. Okay? So, of course, they didn't get any credit in public because nobody knew, and it was just military information. But now their work is recognized as a true birthplace of the Big 5 model. And we don't even have a picture of them. And you see this? This is also where I'm just like, humans are just amazing. And I know I'm human, but it's just like, oh man, like, you see this? Like how an idea can just, like, somebody thinks it, then somebody else like, you know, years later, somebody's interested in, somebody's looking into it, and then they make it bigger or more knowledgeable or more, and then somebody just keeps moving, you know, forward to try to understand humanity even more than before. And that to me is just beautiful. And the thing is, it's like they didn't even ever get credit for it. For 20 years, there's no photo of them. There's no, like, social media posts. There is nothing. There's no interviews. I don't think. I haven't looked that one up yet. But who are these guys? They discovered this. I mean, I know it was like everyone else before them, but there's no photo of them. And for 20 years, their work was just hiding, you know, for 20 years. So the 5 factors they identified, which later there's a few that changed the names. The first one was surgency, which later is called extroversion. Second one is agreeableness. Third, dependability, which later is called conscientiousness. Fourth, emotional stability, which later is called neuroticism. And the 5th one is called culture, which later is called openness. So those were the 5 factors. The 5 factors. And they were not trying to refine Christal's 16 factors that he found. They were asking a different question than Christal. When you look at personality ratings broadly, what is the simplest, most stable structure that keeps appearing? That was the question. The simplest. Because Christal's 16 personality factor, it's a lot to memorize. It's a lot to, it's not easy. You know what I mean? It's not simple. I mean, it's simpler than what was done in the past. But you go from 16 personality traits to 5. It's just like jaw-dropping to me. Okay. So it said, I wrote, Tupes and Christal found high order factors. So even from the 16 that Christal had, they were able to find 5 that describe these 16. So there were broader dimensions that the primaries tend to cluster into. So the 16 that I read to you, there's also more clusters if you do more factor analysis in those. And their 5 factors became the super factors. And that's it for today. I'm going to stop right there because That's enough. And then I will try to do other videos this week if I can. But this was like, to me, when I was doing the research, I found it really so interesting. I feel like, I mean, how long would it took them 2 years to do this, working every single day on this, every single day. And that's why in the past, that's why it took the other researchers longer time, because, you know, they're, I don't know who pays them. You know what I mean? They have to do this on the side of, like, maybe doing clinical work. This is like a side project that they're interested in. This is like something that moves them. They're doing it because they're motivated. They're not doing that because somebody's actually, like, I don't think so anyways, I might be wrong, but I don't think they're doing it because you're gonna get so much money and here it is, you know? They're doing it because they want to move the needle forward of understanding human behavior in more of a statistical, replicable, useful questionnaire in a way. And once these guys that took over, or not took over, once they were assigned this project, it was focused work. It was like, there's nothing else you are doing right now. Once Ernest, Tupes, and Raymond Christal took over, it was like, this is what you guys are doing every single day, right? Every single day you're going to come in here and you're going to work on this. And what you're going to show me is that, is this going to help us, the military, to predict who will succeed, fail, crack under pressure, or lead effectively in life or death situations? That question tells you the motivation. You know, it tells you that, hey, we're not playing any games here. We're not trying to be fuzzy and warm and trying to understand, you know, like fuzzy, warm, subjective, moral, amoral information about human behavior. Like, we want something that we can use, and something that can tell us if this person is good for this job, because this is life or death. This is not a joke. I know for a long time when I would freak out about whatever, you know, I do something wrong or whatever. I think when I was at the bank, probably too, I would get so stressed out. But just in general, in life, I'd have to tell myself, okay, nobody died. Nobody died. Nobody died. I would have to tell myself that, because I would freak out, you know, I'd feel like terrible. I feel like guilty. I'd feel like bad. And then I would remind myself, okay, nobody died. Nobody died. Nobody died. Because then that would, like, bring me back to reality and say, hey, it's not that big of a deal. Everybody messes up. The only thing that's not fixable is death. That's the only thing. And then when I would ask myself that question, then I would think of the people that actually had to figure out life or death situations, like doctors, or like people in the military, or like people that were actually in high stakes situations. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, thank God I don't have those jobs. I was like, thank God I don't have any type of that job, because I would quit. I'd rather, like, do anything else but that. So yeah, it's like, that question is very important. It's life or death. Not about trying to figure out why you're, like, it's like, we're not trying to figure out if you need to change careers. You know, it's more of a, even though that's important in human behavior and future and stuff, it's not life or death. It can be, but it's not most of the time, right? It's not life or death. most decisions are not life or death. Whenever this, I call it, this personality information was just like, hey, this is what we have to have, and it has to be clear, it has to be useful, it has to be predictable. It's life or death. I think that just you know what I mean? It just changed it completely. It really, that's why I feel they were able to go from 16 personality factors to 5, because they were able to, they wanted the simplest way, most stable structure to appear. Like, we're not trying to look at any unconscious thing, childhood trauma. We're looking at real life, your current state of mind, and are you going to be able to not break under pressure? Like, that to me is what, not to, everything that everybody else did before them was very important as well to get it to this point. But I feel that the reason this also is so rigorous and data driven is because it touched the military, because it went through the military. You know what I mean? And that was really eye-opening to me when I was doing the research on it. I was like, wow, I didn't even know that. I was like, that is so interesting. So I will end it there. And we're going to, again, I started, we're going to go through the history of it until I think the early 2000s. And because I love it, because this, again, God placed little puzzle pieces throughout my life, and he knew that I needed something scientific. He knew I was so lost in thinking that I was the problem, not the problem. I'm not gonna say that I was like, but I was so sure that I was too sensitive. I was so sure that I was too not tough enough. God knew that I needed something that was scientific, that was replicable, that had this history of being true. He knew it. In order for me to believe it, he knew that I needed this. I needed data. I needed hundreds of years of data of the most intelligent, people that are just so intelligent. Why? Because I've always admired really intelligent people. He knew. He said, I know you, and I know this is what's going to open your eyes through the truth of the world. And that's why I love it. I love looking at the history. Every time I talk to you guys and I tell you about something that I found, I light up. It speaks to my heart. And I am so happy that I have this space to openly share it and just try to speak from my heart. That's why with the videos, I had my YouTube channel 8 years ago. And I knew it was a call. Like, I knew when I did my YouTube channel in the past, it was something that I loved to do. I loved it. I loved creating the content, but I hated the editing. I hated everything else that came into it. I hated having to think of social media, of titles, of like trendy words, of the algorithm, of this, like, it was just like, oh gosh. I would think to myself, why can't I just tape? Why can't I just tape and upload, right? I was like, why can't I just do that? But I couldn't do that at that time. But now I'm allowing myself to do that. And why? Because of this, because of the big five. That's why. And because of God. God always first and foremost. And yeah. So that's why I will also say, that's why I'm just not, this project is for me and for God. And anything, if it helps anyone in the process, it's because of him. It's because of him. And a prayer I say to myself each and every day is, God, please help me honor the gifts you gave me. Please help me honor the gifts you gave me. Okay, so my toddler needs me. So I'll see you guys later. Bye.